Mr Speaker, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to participate in this first reading of the Psychoactive Substances Amendment Bill, and I do so as a member of the Health Select Committee that passed this piece of legislation. I want to acknowledge the 119 of us in this House that voted in support of this legislation, and I was one of those people. But I do want to highlight a couple of learning opportunities for us as a Parliament. The first learning opportunity was the manner in which this bill was rushed through the House. The reality is we had a truncated process to meet a deadline that the government knew about, but they forced us as a Parliament to rush through a piece of legislation that we are now here having to correct. And the reason that we're here to correct it is because the people of New Zealand collectively have come out, they have marched, they have shown that democracy in this country works. So I also need to pay tribute to John Campbell and the Campbell Live program for allowing the content of our community to be seen and for the large numbers of people and communities around our country that have got huge problems about these substances, having the forum, having the platform to then influence this government. As a member of the Select Committee, it was very interesting because the transition provisions, you're right, were put into the bill because we didn't want blanket prohibition. That was the reality. We recognised that there were products in the country that needed to be regulated. We didn't want prohibition. So what we did was said that if the products had been sold within the last 3 months, that actually was the qualification for them to be sold. But the major flaw in the bill that we, as a collective group of parliamentarians, passed on the 18th of July last year was that we were to develop regulations around the approval process for psychoactive products. And what the public of New Zealand need to know is that the Ministry of Health were empowered with that responsibility. The Associate Minister of Health, Todd McLeay, it was his responsibility to then implement this piece of legislation. And what I've just found out through one of his own press releases is that on the 21st of March this year, the Ministry of Health concluded their submission process. So, in fact, the Ministry of Health at this point in time has not developed the approval process, which is actually the biggest flaw in the bill, the original bill that we are now aiming to address. So this is absolutely the fault of the government. They are trying to say it's the fault of Parliament. Actually, it's not. It's the fault of the government. And what I want to do is acknowledge our local councils, because we did empower our local councils to develop local approved products policy. And what I know in my community of Manurewa is that my local board organised a meeting on the 14th of August last year so that my community could participate in a process so we could develop our local approved products policy. And local councils like Napier City Council, Hamilton City Council, they were onto it. Our councils, our elected local board officials were onto it. This Parliament was not onto it. And so we are all here tonight rushing this bill through because of the implementation on the primary piece of legislation that government absolutely has to take responsibility for. Because unless you have developed a regime...
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair for the dinner break. This debate is interrupted. I shall resume the chair at 7:30.